It's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today, Richard Byrne, high school teacher, award-winning blogger. Richard is best known in the educational technology community for his award-winning blog, Free Technology for Teachers. On a daily basis, Richard's blog reaches subscriber base of more than 48,000 educators. In addition to writing Free Technology for Teachers, Richard writes a monthly column for School Library Journal, is a continuing author to What School Leaders Need to Know About Digital Technologies and Social Media, and is written for Teacher Librarian and recently launched Androids for Schools. Richard has presented at conferences and schools across North America and Europe. Richard's focuses on sharing free web-based resources that educators can use to enhance their students' learning experiences. Richard became a Google certified teacher in 2009, and in 2010, he was the runner-up for AC Actim's Association of the Computer Teachers and Educators of Maine Educator of the Year Award. Teach and Learning magazine named Richard one of their people to watch in their 100 at 30th anniversary celebration. Richard was a high school teacher for 8 years before becoming a full-time writer and speaker. He currently stays involved in the classroom by teaching evening courses on a part-time basis. Richard lives in Greenwood, Maine, where he and his dog, Morrison, try to see if they can catch deers that run through their yard at night in his slippers. Please join me in welcoming Richard Byrne.
Thank you. Thank you. And to clarify, the deer wasn't in slippers, I was in slippers. This just happened Wednesday night. Was it Wednesday night? Tuesday night. I let the dog out at 10 o'clock, and the tail went up, and he went whoosh. And what we learned is a 10-year-old German Shepherd is not quite as fast as a deer, and a 34-year-old Richard is not quite as fast as a 10-year-old German Shepherd. He came back, fortunately, and he was wearing his headlamp, so I could see him in the dark, and I was wearing mine as well. So there he is, actually. So to continue the introduction, if you will. And this morning, I want to talk about this one question: everything's free, and now what? And I get this question at almost every conference I go to. I get this question in emails quite a bit. Is Richard, there's so much stuff out there. What do I do with it all? Or what's good and what's not bad and what's not good? So I developed a little framework to kind of break down what's good, what's not good, and how to evaluate it. But before we get to that, a couple more introductory pieces. As we go through this presentation this morning, there are a few questions that often come up. And these aren't the kind of questions that you will stop me and raise your hand for. You might not even stop me in the hallway and ask. You'll just kind of wonder. Maybe tweet it, or write it on a note, or just whisper to your neighbor. And these three questions are questions that change, but they're pretty much the same everywhere I go. Number one, and I sadly don't get this as much as I used to, and if you're sitting in the front row, you'll probably know why if you look at my head. How old is this guy? See, I don't get it as much as I used to. And how long did I teach? And that question has already been addressed. I taught for 8.5 years. My background is not as a computer teacher. It's social studies. I have a degree in history. I went to a conference similar to this about 6.5 years ago and got introduced to blogging and went, whoa, this is really neat, and started a blog. And one thing led to another, and here I am now. And the follow-up question that I often get is, well, you must not have a life because you write so much stuff. And the answer to that is, well, yeah, you're right, I don't. I live in a town of 700 people. I live in the part of town that has internet access. The other part of town doesn't. It's also the part where the fire department is. So Yeah, I spend a lot of time, probably an unhealthy amount of time, on the internet trying out apps and evaluating them for classroom use. And when I was teaching full-time, it was like having 2 full-time jobs. I never planned it to be that way. It just kind of worked out that way. And the third question that often comes up, and I've probably been talking long enough for some people to start to wonder about it, and by the end of the presentation, you'll definitely wonder about it. Has anyone ever told you you sound like Ray Romano? Yes. So, and hopefully by now you've had time to get the contact information that you may want later to follow up with me and ask questions. I put this slide up at the beginning because what I've learned from doing a lot of keynotes over the last year and a half is that by the end of a keynote, people are like, where's the coffee? And they totally skip this slide and then they track me down later. And my remote has stopped working, so that's awesome. All right, so do a quick little Google search for lesson plans these days. You get 103 million results. Let's be a little more specific. Language arts, 81 million results. Math, 70 million results. Social studies, only 12 million. So if you're a social studies teacher, you're in luck. Your research is really whittled down for you already. So this raises the question of, well, there's so much stuff out there, I don't have the time to evaluate it all. I don't have the time to try it all. What can I do to quickly determine what's going to work in my classroom? And I get emails every day from companies who say, our product is going to revolutionize education. And I say, how's that going to happen? Well, we've developed this online behavior chart. Or we've developed this awesome system where students can write online. I'm like, really? Have you heard of blogging? It's been around for like 10 years now. A little longer than that, actually. Right? And I get those emails all the time. And so my question for those companies is often, all right, what can you really do with this? How are you revolutionizing education? How are you fixing a problem? How are you helping teachers meet curriculum goals? And that's where I'm coming from. When I look at technology, I look at what curriculum goals can I meet using this technology? And the framework that I developed is a framework that's not something that I invented, nor did Gene Wilder. Throughout my presentation, I'm going to tell you some stories about people that I worked with and students that I've had, and all names and likenesses have been changed to protect the innocent. But my department head a few years back, who looks a lot like Gene Wilder, coincidentally, had us in a department meeting. We had new standards that came down from on high to look at. Okay? We've all been in these meetings, right? New standards, we all have to look at this. And he looks over at us after about an hour of venting. He was really good about letting us vent. And he just kind of slammed his hand down on the podium, and he said, guys, this is not new. We're like, what do you mean, Steve? Steve's his name, so I won't give you his last name. And he says, this all comes down to, what are we asking students to do? And he broke it down to 3 ideas that I've applied to using technology in my classroom. And that is the idea of, are we asking students to discover new things? Are we asking them to talk about or discuss things? Or are we asking them to demonstrate what they know? And so this framework that I'm using for technology really applies to all aspects of education. When I'm looking at a resource, I look at it in the terms of, does this help my students discover new information? Does it help them discuss information, have meaningful conversations? And does it help them demonstrate what they know and what they've learned? So let's talk about the discovery piece. Because if we don't have any information to talk about, and we don't have any information to demonstrate, well, then we're stuck. So we need to start with discovery. Discovering some new information. If we give students a research question, where do they go first? Shout it out. Where? Yeah, why do they go to Wikipedia?
Is the best thing ever. Anyone in the world can write anything they want about any subject. so you know you are getting the best possible information.
Why do they end up at Wikipedia? It's easy. And if they go to the mother of all information, it's often the first thing that comes up. And why is that the first thing that comes up? Because it's used so often. And also because sometimes our search terms are terrible. Right? Our students often will go to Google, and they will type in exactly the question that you gave them. Which leads us usually to Wikipedia, Yahoo Answers, Wiki Answers, or something equally useful, or not useful. They don't know how to search. So one of the things that I've started to ask students to do, and right now my role in school is a little bit weird. And I don't mean weird. It's weird for me. It's not like a weird thing. It's just a weird place in my career right now, is that I'm only working with students and working with adult students twice a week in 6-week blocks. So I don't quite get the relationship that I used to get with full semester of students. But one of the things that I ask students to do right now is before they go to the Google and Google a question, to write down what do you think the answer to the question is, and Google that. Because if we just go to Google and we type in the question, well, so everyone else is doing the same thing, so what's going to happen? Well, we're going to keep getting these results that aren't quite as useful as we would hope. Right? And we have a lot of information in our heads, and our students have a lot of information in their heads. If we just force them to access it before they go Google, dump in the question. And to think about, what have other people possibly said about my topic? And what's another way to phrase the topic? Here's a little exercise. If you want to kind of show students how to change the way they think about Googling. Have them research movies from the 1920s. When they do this, their results are not quite as abundant as they would hope. Why? What's different about 1920s movies from movies today? And it has nothing to do with the content of the movie. They're fewer, they're silent, and they weren't always called movies. What were they often called? Moving pictures, cinemascope, talkies. Right? Now, we're still searching for the same information, but we're using different terms because if we stop and we think about, what do we already know about this topic? We become much more effective Google users. Not to mention the fact that students often never look at the advanced search menu in Google, which I'll do in the Google Across the Curriculum presentation later today. Shameless plug for my presentation later from the Shameless Commerce Division. And if you know the answer to that, I'll give you a $26 gift certificate later. So, Google is awesome. However, for a lot of students, Google is a bit overwhelming, particularly our younger students. Right? Sweet Search is a search engine alternative. It's another search engine where all the links are reviewed by real people for their validity, for their usefulness in education. Sweet Search has two versions, Sweet Search, which is kind of a middle school, high school search engine, and Sweet Search for Me, which is a elementary school, maybe even pre-K site. Now, the number of links that students are going to find is much lower than what they're going to find in Google or Bing or in Yahoo, because it takes a long time for people to review links. Changing up search terms. We just did a little exercise here where we accessed our own prior information. And we changed up our search terms just a little bit. Instagrok is a neat little tool. How many people remember the Google Wonder Wheel? All right. I loved the Wonder Wheel. It was awesome. And then it just disappeared. like things do sometimes. Google just said, no, we don't want to use it anymore, so they got rid of it. Instagrok uses that concept of the wonder wheel. Oh, I've got a topic, but I'm not quite sure where to go with it yet. Let's create a web-related search terms. And that's not all that Instagrok does. Instagrok solves another problem for me. And it's the problem that we've all seen. Go to any network printer in any school in the country, and you'll see the problem too. Reams of paper that have been printed out, mostly from Wikipedia, where students needed one page or one paragraph. Or we also have the problem of, all my bookmarks are on that computer, Mr. Byrne, and someone else is using that computer. What do I do? Instagrok allows my students to pin all their results into their Instagrok account, and a neat little feature that they're developing right now is the option for me as a teacher to log in and see what are they pinning. So if they're going way off topic, or their research is just taking a left turn where they need to go right, I can see what they're doing and I can jump in and say, ooh, you might want to try this. And I'm a big fan of Wolfram Alpha because I'm a lousy math student. Does anyone use Wolfram Alpha? Okay. Now, Wolfram Alpha is an interesting search engine because it's not a search engine where we're looking for links, right? What we're looking for is computational data. We're looking for information. In Wolfram Alpha, a lot of math teachers love it and hate it because students can go and they can type in an equation, they can get an answer. And I thought for a while, yeah, that's, if I don't have to do the math, I just type it in, great. What I learned this summer, I had the good fortune to speak at a workshop, speak at a conference that Dan Meyer keynoted. Dan Meyer is well known for his TED Talk, Math Class Needs a Makeover. And I sat in on one of his workshops, and not being a math teacher, not even being able to pretend to be a math teacher, I went to see what I could learn. What I learned from Dan was, you know what? If we ask the right questions, Wolfram Alpha can't answer it for me. And the way that Dan proved this to me is he had me do a little exercise where I didn't know the language of math. It was a calculus question, and I just didn't know which functions to enter into Wolfram Alpha. He had stumped me at that point. I said, oh, that's the difference. When we change the question, when we make it a question where our students have to have the background knowledge, we can't just dump it in anymore. If you don't know what you're searching for, you can't get the answer. And that's what Dan proved to me with Wolfram Alpha is, oh, it's a great search engine if you know what you're looking for. However, if you're wondering, oh, my students now can just go there, change up the search terms. Now, so far I've just talked about things that I've discovered, things I've learned. I want to tell you a little story about one of my students, Tyler. Tyler was one of those students, and we've all had this student, who you would just love to take home with you because you knew if you could take him home, you could get him on the right track. You know, things just weren't going well for this student. Like, oh, I just want to adopt this kid. Bring that student home with me. Remember, we've all had that student. That was Tyler for me. Tyler was 18 when I had him, and he had about a half a dozen credits in high school. Not necessarily all because of his own doing. Just kind of had a tough go at it in school. School was not a great place for Tyler. But I had Tyler in this class. And Tyler kind of reminds me of a polar bear. That's why I put him up there. Because, you know, he could have this real gentle, cuddly moment, but he could also have this real moment. And if you're trying to spell on Twitter right now, it's AAARRGGGH. So Tyler's having a tough go of it, and he's in my US history class for students who are trying to graduate on time. And Tyler comes to me after this quiz that every student had to take, regardless of which class they were in. If they were in honors, AP, they were in a special ed class, they had to take this same quiz, the same test. Every quarter we get the same assessment to all the kids. And he came up to me and he said, "Mr. Byrne," "Yeah?" He said, "I know the Revolutionary War." I'm like, "That's great. How do you know?" "Because we did that Google Earth thing." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, when we went and we looked at all the tours, I remember all that." So when we're looking for information, we need to look beyond the Google and beyond what we think is going to work. Tyler, really struck me with this, "Oh, you know what? That works for me." And the Google Earth tour that we used in that class wasn't any different than anything I had done in paper in years prior. Before we had laptops for every student in the high school, I had done the same activity on paper where you wrote out on the paper map where the Revolutionary War battles were. But this new dimension of, oh, I can zoom in, I can zoom out, I can add pictures, I can watch videos, made it work for Tyler. Now I want to tell you about another little staff meeting or department meeting issue. I worked in a department of 11 people. The youngest person in the department had been there for 5 years. The oldest people in the department had been there for approaching 35 years. We had some department meetings where we ended up going, "I think we've talked about all of this." It was 3 years ago. Remember this conversation? And you were sitting in that chair, the same chair you're sitting in now, and you were reading the newspaper. We've all been in these meetings. So in 2006, I discovered this neat little network called Twitter. Twitter was this new thing that really no one knew what to do with. I discovered it. I was reading an article in the MIT Media Lab journal. It was an article with Biz Stone, who was one of the founders of Twitter. And he was just tweeting about the steak that he was grilling and that sort of stuff. All the stuff that we generally associate with Twitter. And so I started on Twitter and went, it's interesting. And so for a while, I was just tweeting what I was eating for dinner too, and wondering, why doesn't anyone care? Everybody cares about Biz Stone's dinner, but doesn't care about my dinner. And so I changed my Twitter account and tried again. Took a little layoff from Twitter, came back again, and discovered other teachers were on there. And other teachers were sharing really useful information. And I brought that into my department meeting. Now, I tried like heck to get all my department to go on Twitter. And some of you could probably relate to this feeling of young gun in the department, automatically going to get shut down. So I tried to get everyone on Twitter. That didn't go over so well. But what I did have success with doing was saying, have we tried this? And all I was doing was lifting ideas from other people on Twitter and bringing those into the department meeting so that now we had some new things to talk about, or new approaches for old things that we were doing. Now, I'm not here to convince you to get on Twitter today. If you're not on Twitter, I'll convince you later in the hallway if you want to, but I'm not going to do that right now. But I do want to point out that Twitter has some really useful features you can take advantage of even if you don't sign up on Twitter. If you just want to lurk on Twitter, it's a great place to, I'm going to say, borrow ideas from other people, and borrow links from other people and resources from other people. Because we don't have to go out and discover everything on our own. We can let the group work together. It's search.twitter.com. And maybe you'll search for one of these terms. Here's a big list of educational hashtags or educational chats. If you want that whole list, you can find it at bit.ly/ECHTS12. I don't remember what those letters stood for, but they were important at the time when I made that shortened link. The educational hashtag that you can search even if you're not signed in on Twitter, even if you're not a Twitter user, okay, not a tweeter a tweeter, you can glean good information. And the power of the community piece. How many people are still saving or are using some kind of web-based way to save their bookmarks? Awesome. If you're not, start that today. That is one thing that I will try to convince you of today. If you're not saving your bookmarks online somewhere, start today. So that when the tech department comes to you and says, I'm taking your computer because we need to re-image it and update it to Windows 8, and you go, oh no, I've got 17 years of bookmarks on this computer. And how do I get them? And the tech person says to you, well, you're going to export it as an HTML file, and then you're going to import it into the new browser. And you go, what? Okay. Sign up for some type of online service. There's two that I really like. Digo I like to use with students, because I can create groups for my classes and share the bookmarks that are relevant for each class, and my students can share the bookmarks they're finding with each other. They can also highlight little pieces of the page so that they don't come back to a website later and go, what was it I needed on this page? And they print out the 38 pages from that pile, and then they pull out one. And by the way, living in Maine and working in a school that has a forestry program, I always have this mixed feeling about saying don't print things, because we really like the printing because it keeps the forestry program going. But on the same time, I'm aware of the greater impact. And how do I keep up with all this stuff? This is the question I get all the time is, Richard, how do you keep up with all this stuff? I know you don't have a life, but still. Well, I use an RSS reader. And I subscribe to a lot of blogs and websites. I subscribe to about 300 or so right now. I don't recommend subscribing to that many unless you have a full-time job of reading RSS feeds. But what it does, it brings a lot of information to me instead of going out and looking for it. And I just want the newest information. And you can use Google Reader to read all that stuff. And I did for years. I only used Google Reader. I went reader.google.com, and I would scroll through with my space bar through all my Google Reader updates. It's a long way of going about it. I joined the tablet generation a couple years ago, and I discovered an app called Feedly. Now, Feedly takes all my RSS feeds that were in Google Reader, puts it into this nice magazine format. Doesn't seem like a big deal. However, when you have that image to quickly associate with a blog post, and you have the title, and you have 6 or 8 of those images and titles on one page, you can scroll through a lot quicker. I can also, from Feedly, share out to all of my networks, so it could be Twitter, Facebook, to my Digo account, to my Evernote account, to Pinterest. How many people are pinning things these days? Yes. How many people are pinning things for education uses? Awesome. Right? When I asked that question 6 months ago, there were very few hands. So Pinterest has really caught on. And I discovered Pinterest actually from my sister, who started pinning things, her kind of request for the house, for her Christmas list. And QR codes. QR codes, we can use that to discover information, right? If you stand outside, you can pick up all the information. QR codes are old, though. 3 years ago, people were talking about QR codes in the classroom. And 3 years ago, QR codes were already old. The technology for scanning them, however, had become very abundant. What's next? What's next in discovery of information? Well, it's this idea of augmented reality. How many people are playing with augmented reality today? Just a few. In 5 years, my feeling is we'll all have tried some augmented reality. What is it? You might be wondering, what is augmented reality? And rather than try to explain it, I'm going to show you what it looks like with a little app called Aurasma. Now, I have in front of me a Nexus 7 tablet with an Apple sticker on the back of it. because neither one of these companies pay me to promote their products. So I like to confuse people. And I got this summer when it came out, and the iPad mini was still just a rumor. So I was holding it up and covering the Nexus logo and tweeting out pictures of my iPad mini. Okay. Now, that has nothing to do with this app that I'm about to show you. So on my iPad, which on the back has a Google logo, I'm going to start a little augmented reality battle between Apple and Google. And this is technology that will work for all kinds of fun things. This is a fun activity, but there are schools, particularly universities, that are now using this as a way to add a third layer of information to textbooks. And probably the most interesting use I've seen is in an anatomy textbook, where a student can scan a picture of a model and spin it around and zoom in on it. So the app I'm using is called Aurasma. And there we go. Uh-oh, I changed my password. Okay, there we go. So here's the app. Now remember, Apple logo on the back of the Nexus 7 tablet. Scan the logo. I don't know who wins. But that's the same way that technology can work in a textbook or with any physical object. So I can say, hey, I want to scan that object and get something else to happen. I want a video to play. I want an animation to play. And I worked with this school in North Carolina this summer who started using some augmented reality to add a third layer of information to the Giving Tree. That great Shel Silverstein story, The Giving Tree, which I loved as a kid. The students were able to scan pages with their iPads and get animations for the Giving Tree to happen on their iPad, right in front of them. So you can create your own layer. I created that layer in Aurasma. I created that animation to happen. Aurasma is a free app that you can do that with. And think about all the possibilities. Right, you have textbooks. You know, your department has old textbooks. They're not going to buy new ones, or they don't have money to buy new ones. You want to add some new information to it, but your school has iPads. Or your school has a Nexus 7 tablet. A Nexus 7 tablet you can run Aurasma on, as well as a lot of other Android tablets. So those are all tools for discovering information. Let's talk about discussing information. And I want to share a quick little story about two of my favorite students. These are not them. These are actually my nieces. I don't teach preschool. Oh, two nieces is enough preschool for me. I want to talk about these two nieces. So Trish and Tara are the chatty students. We've all had them. Trish and Tara have comments about everything. Sometimes they're useful comments. Sometimes they're not useful comments. Sometimes they're useful questions. Sometimes they're not useful questions. But they always have them. Right? We've all had these students, and they want to just dominate the conversation. So a few years back, I started to say, well, you know what? You have a way to express yourself without always dominating the conversation. So I set them up on Wall Wisher. This is a Wall Wisher wall from a workshop that I did actually a couple years ago. It was a place for my students to quickly post their comments, their questions, or their discoveries of information that they wanted to share with the class, because they could put their links or their videos on there. And at first, like anything else, when I showed this to my students, they went, we can talk about anything we want on here. I'm like, yeah, you can. And so this is the responses that I got. All right. Trish, hello, OMG, what the heck, very strange. By the way, Mr. Byrne, what were you thinking? I got that a lot from Trish. And Tara says, hey, this is fun, let's do it again. And they did. They did this the whole year. Trish and Tara got to the point where if I didn't set up a wall, they set it up because they wanted that place where they could express themselves, and they knew that I would get to their questions and get back to them. And today's Meet's another tool that I've used a lot in my classroom as a way for students to express themselves. I made the mistake one year, my first year teaching, of showing the movie Gandhi to freshmen. Not just a clip of Gandhi, the whole 3.5-hour epic, which I love. As a history geek, I thought it was a great film. The fact that the district renewed my contract is amazing after that incident. I know this is more about the district's faith in me or the job market at the time. So I've learned not to show Gandhi and not to show these long epic films, but I still love video, and I love showing video clips to my students because they create great conversations. The problem is that sometimes my students want to talk about everything they see, and there's other students in the class who want to just take it all in and reflect at the end. So the compromise position is to use today's Meet, where my students who want to comment on everything or ask clarifying questions as the video goes on, they can do it there. And the students who want to wait to the end, they can wait to the end and put their comments in as well. How many people have a blog? How many people are actively blogging? Okay. How many people have a blog somewhere on the web, but they don't know how to get to it anymore? I have some of those too. There are 13 blogs in my Blogger account right now, and I use 2 of them actively right now. The internet is littered with blogs that fall into that category of we started it, but we gave up on it. Or we started it and we just forgot about it. And it's usually not a willful act of I forgot about it. It's not like one day I'm tired of blogging, I'm done. It's usually not that. It's usually what happens with school blogs and classroom blogs is we started out in September. We have the best of intentions. We're going to blog every day. I'm going to post all my assignments. Students are going to write on this thing every day. And what happens? The third week of school rolls around and something has popped up. And you kind of forget about it, and it goes off. Or you have the other situation where it's just easier to say in the first 2 weeks of school, yep, here's an extra copy of the syllabus. When it's posted right on the blog, and you can tell the students, go to MrByrneTeaches.com or go to WeLearnTheWorld.com or whatever your classroom blog is, we just pass out the extra paper. We give the directions again. We don't get into that habit of saying, you need to go check the blog. You need to write on the blog. One of the pitfalls that I've seen is people who start to use blogs as journals, then they accept paper journals instead. So what happens is, well, I couldn't get to the computer lab, or I couldn't get to the library, or my computer's broken, or I forgot about it until this morning while I was on the school bus, and I wrote it out on this piece of paper. Can you take it? And we say, yeah, you still did the writing. So it's a habit. Getting a blog going is relatively easy. You can start a blog in a matter of minutes. Keeping that blog going is a hard thing to do, and it takes commitment. Now, that commitment doesn't have to be this giant thing, like every week, every student's going to write a 5-paragraph essay on the blog, and we're all going to peer edit the blog. It doesn't have to be that. A simple activity, and an activity that I require all my students to do, is once a week, just a short reflection. What did we learn this week? What questions do I have moving forward? And you have to answer someone else's question. Real simple activity. It takes 5 minutes. A lot of my students do it from their cell phones. And that's a quick way to get students in the habit of going to that blog, checking that blog. We Learn the World is one from my current events class a couple of years ago. And the students were surveying the school at this time. Or you can go with the other format of, I'm just going to share information and get it out there. And it's a great way for students to share and discuss and participate in discussions on the things they're learning. And I use Blogger. I mentioned Blogger in the interest of fairness. I also like EduBlogs. So another great platform, and a lot of people ask me about it. Now my blog is my life. And not just my Free Tech for Teachers blog, because that helps pay the rent. And my landlord is very happy about that. But in my classroom, that's where everything happens. All my activities start at that blog. Today's lesson plan, go to the blog. Going to be out of school, you're at a conference, your lesson plan for the sub is tell the kids to go to the blog. That way you don't come back to the school and you get, the sub didn't tell us to do that. I didn't know we had to return that. And better yet, how many people are overwhelmed with email? I'm overwhelmed with email. I woke up this morning, I had 47 emails. I was at 0 at 10 o'clock last night. I was watching the highlights of the Celtics game, or the lowlights of the Celtics game, really. First game I got to watch on TV all year, because I'm on TV at home, and that was the game. Anyway, I digress. I put Dropbox on my blog, because I don't want 47 emails a day with all kinds of random attachments from my students. I use Dropbox, and I use a service called Drop It to Me that allows me to sync all that information into one Dropbox. Students can upload information through my blog. Just another little thing to put on your blog to make it a place where students can add information. Finally, this demonstration piece. Who can recognize that picture? How many of you have one of those in your classroom still? Okay, all right. No one's going to out themselves. My very first course in college was art history. 8 a.m., I'm a skinny little freshman taking this huge lecture hall. It was all slides all the time. I never saw the professor the whole semester because he stood in the back with that slide projector, and we learned about all kinds of art history stuff that I've since forgotten. But I do love the visual effects, and I love having kids create media. And I love videos. I fell in love with history in the 5th grade. I had Mrs. Zahowski in the 5th grade, and we had film strips, and we had reel-to-reel movies, right? I loved the film strips, especially when I got to be in charge of it. Beep, turn, because it drove me nuts when the other kids couldn't master the beep turn. And Mrs. Zahowski had this knack for sticking her finger in the reel-to-reel and stopping it right on cue. I don't know how she didn't lose her fingers, but don't try that at home. And then when I got into the 7th grade, we got to make our own movies. And then when I was in the 7th grade, that required getting the big camera that had the big tape, that had the small tape. Right? And the little tape that went inside it, little 8 millimeter tape that went inside the bigger tape and the big camera. And there was a lot of bad acting. And then we went down to the computer lab, or the media lab, where we were editing the tape, literally editing the tape. Major project, and I can't tell you that it was that valuable a project. Today, our students can make these videos very quickly. Animoto is a service that I discovered, and in part, I discovered it because of students. I have to thank a student for this. My student, Kempson. Kempson was a student who was in my 9th grade study hall a few years back, and Kempson loved just to Google things and just go all over the place on the internet. And she would make stuff, and she had a GeoCities site, and she was doing all kinds of stuff. She had a MySpace. It was like, just all kinds of flashing Las Vegas type of things going on. But Kempson showed me Animoto. And I was like, wow, this is really neat. I came back from lunch. We had the whole class making videos right after lunch. First time I had ever seen Animoto. Like, wow, this changes everything. Now, Animoto gets a lot of criticism because it's not a full-featured film. It's not terribly intensive in terms of editing. But the idea that students can quickly accumulate information and put it into a visual format that they're comfortable with, that looks good, and that they're proud of. Another tool that I really like is called WeVideo. If you want a longer video project, WeVideo is a collaborative online video editing tool. Students can work together, just like in Google Documents. They can work together on the same project. So I can have one student who's out in charge of getting pictures, another student who's in charge of the soundtrack, and they can edit this project from wherever they are. One of the really key points about making videos in the classroom is that it can shift the relationship that happens in the classroom from this relationship of, oh, when we do peer editing with our papers, it's, I got to look through and write about Billy's commas, and I have to check on Susie's spelling. Right? And the students don't get too excited about it. They get really excited about watching each other's videos. And the other piece that they get excited about is sharing their videos. Try to get all your students to stand up and read their 5-paragraph essay to the class. It's not a whole lot of fun. And they're nervous, but sharing that video, they're real proud of their videos because they look good. And the final piece, and the piece that was really important for me working with a lot of students who didn't always have the best relationship with the principal's office. They knew everyone down there, but it wasn't like this nice buddy-buddy relationship. But my students were able to make some really nice videos. And I was able to invite my principal in, and I could say, hey, Ted, why don't you just stop in and for just 2 minutes, see what they're doing, watch what they're doing. And Ted did that. And I ended up getting invited to see the school board for good things. Got to see the school board and talk about what I was doing, and I showed the school board some of the videos from my special ed group. They're like, wow, this is really cool. And they weren't these long, drawn-out video productions, but it changed for my students the perception of the principal, the perception of the principal's office, of not just, ooh, Mr. Moshe's coming in, that means something bad is happening, right? Mr. Moshe's coming in, and he's just here to hang out and see what we're doing. Not to be overlooked, I love YouTube. Although I do hate that Gangman-style video. That thing drives me nuts. Oh, I'm sorry, it just drives me nuts. I know it's the most watched video, more than Justin Bieber, but it drives me nuts. But YouTube has some great video editing tools that I think we overlook. If you have access to YouTube in your school, and more schools, fortunately, are giving access to YouTube, there's some great built-in video editing tools. And one of the tools that I really like is the YouTube annotations tool. It allows you to create choose-your-own-adventure videos, a series of videos that are linked together. So let's say we put up 2 options and say, I want to learn more about the history of Rome, or more about the history of Egypt. I'll click on one of those 2 options within the video and go to the next video in that series.
Welcome.
Here's how it looks.
Are you hungry for some delicious information on the French Revolution in Egypt? Well, today we are serving up an all-you-can-learn buffet. Click here to learn about the first stage a revolution goes through.
So with the YouTube annotation tool, that stage 1 becomes a hyperlink that goes out to the next video in the series. At the end of this series, which was developed by Greg Kulick, who was actually here earlier this week, did anyone see any of his presentations? This was developed by his students. At the end of this, these 2 girls are competing for your votes for the best video in the series. Now, making it an instructional video. I thought about having students make the videos. How about making your own instructional videos? Instead of relying on Khan Academy or someone else's videos, make your own instructional videos. There's lots of tools for doing this. On your iPad, there's some great apps. On the web, the tool that I like is Screener, which is a really easy way to record everything happening on my screen. And I really like having students work together to demonstrate what they've found and what they're learning and what they're sharing. And ThingLink is a really neat tool that students can use to create interactive images, collaboratively create interactive images. Put these little pin marks on them. And when they click on those pin marks, they get a little image of something else. Or they get a link to an article. Or they get a link to a video, and they can watch the video about that topic. One of my favorite examples of this is a mind map. Students drew out a mind map, and they uploaded the picture to ThingLink. Now, in each part of the mind map, they linked out to videos. They linked out to other materials related to their mind map. And ThingLink is a free tool that you can do that with. How many people have used iBooks Author? Okay. Just a few. Why? Because iBooks Author requires a lot of things. First of all, you have to have an Apple computer. And you have to be up to date with the latest version of this operating system. Great program. I like it. I've used it. However, it's limiting because it's restricted to the Apple side of things. Simple Booklet is a tool that's been out for a couple of years that allows anyone on the web to create their own multimedia booklets. I can drop in my videos. I can drop in my audio clip. I can drop in my links, my graphics, whatever I want to add to my simple booklet. It's a great way for students to organize their research, to share their research, and to share their writing. And where are they going to share it? Well, I often have them share it on Wiki Spaces, a course wiki, a class wiki. Why on a class wiki? So that everyone can see it and everyone can learn from it. And here's one. Here's one that we did a few years back. My freshman students were researching Darfur at the time. Each student had their own topic. Each student was responsible to maintain that page and update that page. And to read that information was really key. And why was that information really key? Why did they have to read each other's work and edit each other's work? Because that was the review guide. Because the textbook I had in that year ended in 1999. And this was in 2007. So we didn't have the most recent information available. This became the review guide. Voicethread, if there's an old and reliable tool on the web, it's Voicethread. Voicethread's been out for 5 years, coming on 5 years now. It's an old standby. What can you do with it? How does this make our learning collaborative? How do we demonstrate information with Voicethread? I like to get the community involved. I'm a history teacher, so this is, again, a social studies example. A few years back, and I'm sure other schools have this same dilemma, we had a lot of students disappear to go to the fair. Big fair season, big fair coming into town, a lot of students going to the fair. And is it an excused absence? No, not really, but did we get really upset about it? No, not really either, because it's kind of a cultural thing that's always happened. And that year I said, if you go to the fair, if you're missing my classes to go to the fair, here is your assignment. You need to talk to your grandparent, your uncle, your aunt, your mother, your father, somebody, about what the fair was like when they were going to it as a kid, skipping high school. You need to get them into the Voicethread. And I don't care how you get them into the Voicethread. If you bring your netbook to the fair and you can pick up some Wi-Fi, great. If you have to Skype them in and record them and get them into the Voicethread, fine. But it has to be a community project. We have to get someone else involved. It has to be a collaborative assignment. And on that note, I've got a little video clip that I like to end with. Before we end with that, I just want to give you the idea that there's so much information out there that having a framework to quickly analyze, all right, will this help me help my students discover new information? Will it help my students discuss information in a way that's productive? And will this help my students demonstrate what they learn? Like I said, it's a framework that doesn't apply just to technology, but technology enhances it. And when we have that opportunity to enhance it, we need to give our students the freedom to go and explore it. We give them that framework, now go and explore. And I've had the good fortune, like I said, to go to a lot of conferences this year, and I have flown a lot of airline miles. And I fly on US Air a lot. And I fly on US Air a lot because they have a lot of flights out of Portland. And recently I was on a flight back from Philadelphia up to Portland, and I got to sit next to a flight attendant who was off duty. And got into a little conversation with her about kind of all of her flights and whatnot. And I asked her about this commercial that U.S. Airlines has their flight attendants reading during the flight now. I said, do you guys have to read that? She says, yeah, we do. In fact, we have to have this script memorized. We have to have all of the things that you hear memorized by the time we leave the training. I was like, really? Why? Because we get evaluated on it. That's interesting. Now, put that up against other companies like Southwest Airlines, who has a model of have fun, where they have to just share the same safety information, like don't go out on the wing during the flight, that sort of thing. Right? It's one of the things I've heard on Southwest is don't go out on the wing. They give their employees the flexibility to do what's right for their customers, whereas U.S. Airlines, and this is not just a U.S. Airlines knock, right? But they say you have to follow the script. And oftentimes we do that in our school. We say, you have to use Voicethread. But what about using this, Mr. Byrne? Well, can you get the same thing done? Yeah? Okay, use that. Kempson with the video. So I don't want to do PowerPoint. This is way better than PowerPoint. Go for it, Kempson. Giving our students that flexibility. And Southwest Airlines does that, and so here's how they do it.
Good evening, folks. Welcome aboard Southwest Airlines Flight 372, service to Oklahoma City. Those of you that have flown us before know that we do things a little bit differently here on Southwest. Some of us tell jokes, some of us sing, some of us just stand there and look beautiful. I, unfortunately, can do none of those. So here's the one thing that I do know how to do. We're going to shake things up a little bit. I need a little audience participation. Otherwise, this is not going to go over well at all. So here's what I need, especially you guys in the front because you know what's coming. All right, I need a beat. All right? All I need you to do is stomp and clap, and I'm going to do the rest because I've had 5 flights today, and I just cannot do the regular boring announcement again. Otherwise, I'm going to put myself to sleep. So, you guys with me? All right. So give me a stomp, clap, stomp, clap. Come on, stomp, clap, stomp, clap. Stay on beat there. There you go. Keep that going. This is Flight 372 on SWA. The flight attendants on board serving you today. Teresa in the middle, David in the back. My name is David and I'm here to tell you that shortly after takeoff, first things first, there's soft drinks and coffee to quench your thirst. But if you want another kind of drink, then just holler. Alcoholic beverages will be $4. If a Monster energy drink is your plan, that'll be $3 and you get the whole can. We won't take your cash, you gotta pay with plastic. If you have a coupon, then that's fantastic. We know you're ready to get to new places. Open up the bins, put away your suitcases. Carry-on items go under the seat in front of you, so none of you have things by your feet. If you have a seat on the road with the exit, we're gonna talk to you, so you might as well expect it. You gotta help evacuate in case we need you. If you don't want to, then we're gonna reseat you. Before we leave, our advice is put away your electronic devices. Fasten your seatbelt, then put your trays up. Press the button to make the seat back raise up. Sit back, relax, have a good time. It's almost time to go, so I'm done with the rhyme. Thank you for the fact that I wasn't ignored. This is Southwest Airlines. Welcome aboard.
Now, the conclusion to this story, right? So someone put this on YouTube. It got spread all over the place. It was a viral hit about 4 years ago. Conclusion to this story is this flight attendant was invited to wrap the annual shareholder report at the shareholder meeting. So if we just give our students that framework and let them go, here's what you need to prove, go for it. Our students, you never know where they're going to end up. They could be YouTube rapping sensations. So I thank you for your time, and if you have follow-up questions for me, please stop me in the hallway or hit me up on any of these networks or just Google me and see what I'm up to these days and see what my dog is up to as well, see if we've caught a deer. Thank you.